The millionaire invited his maid to a corporate dinner. Her actions left everyone speechless. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The golden light of sunset spilled through the tall windows of Ethan Reed's penthouse. From where he stood, the city stretched endlessly below, glittering like scattered diamonds. On the marble counter lay a stack of invitations embossed with gold. Tonight was the most important business dinner of the year. Investors, shareholders, and even his ex-fiancée, now a rival CEO, would be there. Ethan checked his reflection in the mirror, adjusting his tie with mechanical precision. Everything in his world was polished, controlled, and predictable. Everything, except the fact that he had no one to take to that dinner. Appearances mattered in his circle, and showing up alone would give the press exactly what they wanted. A story about the cold CEO who cannot hold a heart. Downstairs, Leila Hart, his live-in maid, was dusting the shelves. Her hair was tied back neatly, her uniform plain, her movements quiet and efficient. She had worked for him for nearly 2 years. Invisible, but indispensable. She never spoke unless spoken to. And yet Ethan had begun to notice her calm presence lately, how she hummed softly while cleaning, how she always remembered to leave fresh coffee on his desk at 6 sharp. He looked at the clock. Time was running out. Everyone important would arrive in less than 2 hours. Out of nowhere, he heard himself say, "Lila." She turned, startled. "Yes, Mr. Reed?" "Put on something formal," he said flatly, almost to his own surprise. "You are coming with me tonight." She blinked, certain she had misheard. "Sir, me? To the corporate dinner?" He nodded once, his voice calm but firm. "You will attend as my guest. It is a temporary arrangement. Think of it as a favor." Her mouth parted in disbelief. "But, to Sir, I am just a person who knows how to listen," he interrupted. "That is more than I can say for most of the people in that room." Leila hesitated, glancing at her hands, still covered in faint traces of polish. She wanted to refuse. This was madness, but then she remembered the overdue tuition notice tucked inside her apron. Her brother's future depended on her keeping this job. Finally, she nodded. "If that is what you need, to sir." Ethan gave a small, approving smile. "Good. A car will pick us up at 7. As she climbed the stairs to her small room on the top floor, her heart pounded in confusion. What was she doing? She had never worn anything close to an evening dress. She had never stepped into a room filled with millionaires and cameras. She opened the old wooden closet where only uniforms hung and whispered to herself, "Just one night, Lila. Do not mess it up." Meanwhile, Ethan stood by the window again, phone in hand, staring at the city lights. He was not sure why he had asked her. Maybe because she was the only person around him who did not pretend. Maybe because tonight, he needed someone real beside him, even if she was just the maid. Outside, the city buzzed, unaware that this simple decision, taking his maid to a business dinner, was about to change both their lives forever. That evening, the rain returned to the city like a quiet whisper against glass. By the time the black sedan pulled up in front of the Reed Tower, Leila Hart had transformed beyond recognition. The simple navy gown she borrowed from the stylist fit her modestly, and her hair, once tied in a plain bun, now framed her face softly. She had never worn high heels before. Each step felt like walking on a tightrope, one misstep away from disaster. In the elevator, silence filled the space between her and Ethan Reed. He looked every bit the part of a millionaire CEO. Sharp black suit, cufflinks engraved with his initials, and an expression carved from stone. Lila glanced at their reflection in the mirrored walls and barely recognized the woman standing next to him. "You look decent," he said at last, his tone restrained. "Just remember, speak only if spoken to. Stay by my side and keep your answers short." She nodded quickly. "Yes, Mr. Reed." The elevator chimed. As the doors opened, light and sound swallowed them whole. The corporate dinner was held in one of Manhattan's most exclusive hotels. Crystal chandeliers glimmered overhead, and laughter rose from tables draped in white linen. Photographers hovered near the entrance. Ethan's arrival turned heads immediately. The whispers started. "Is that Ethan Reed?" And who's the woman with him? Leela could feel the eyes, the curiosity, the judgment. Her palms were damp. She forced a small smile and kept close to Ethan. When an older man approached the company's chairman, Mr. Hollis, Ethan's polite mask returned. Ethan, good to see you. The man greeted warmly before his gaze shifted to Lila. And who might this be? Ethan's hesitation was brief but noticeable. My guest for the evening, he said simply. Lila extended her hand, her voice steady, though her heart raced. It is a pleasure to meet you. Sir. The man's eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised by her composure. Likewise. As they moved through the crowd, Lila caught sight of a woman in a silver gown watching them intently. She recognized her from the tabloids. Vanessa Moore, Ethan's ex-fiancée and the CEO of a competing firm. Her red lips curved into a smirk as she approached. Well, Ethan, Vanessa purred. I did not realize you had replaced me so quickly. Ethan's jaw tightened. It is a professional dinner. Vanessa, do not make it personal. Vanessa's eyes swept over Lila like a blade. Oh, I am sure she is very professional. Lila's cheeks burned, but before Ethan could respond, a waiter stumbled nearby, nearly spilling a tray of glasses. Instinct took over. Lila reached out and steadied the tray before a single drop could fall. The waiter stammered his thanks, relief flooding his face. It is all right, she said softly. Accidents happen. The moment lasted only seconds, but it caught the attention of those nearby. Vanessa frowned, her smirk faltering. Mr. Hollis chuckled. Quick reflexes. Impressive. Ethan looked at Lila, really looked at her, and for the first time that night, the tension in his shoulders eased. Dinner began. Lila sat quietly beside him, listening as the table buzzed with talk of mergers, profits, and power. When someone asked her opinion on a new real estate expansion, she hesitated, then spoke carefully. I think success should not only be measured by numbers. The people who build the company's foundation matter just as much as the ones who lead it. Her words, simple, yet sincere, drew silence for a heartbeat. Then the chairman nodded. Well said, to young lady. Across the table, Vanessa's smile froze. Ethan leaned back slightly, hiding a faint smile of his own. The woman who had started the evening as his housekeeper had just silenced a table of millionaires with nothing but honesty. As the night went on, he could not shake the thought that bringing her here might have been the best decision he had made in years. Outside, the rain eased, leaving the city washed clean. And inside, for the first time in a long while, Ethan Reed felt something he had not felt in years: pride that came not from status, but from seeing someone's quiet dignity outshine the noise of wealth. When the dinner finally ended, the guests slowly began to leave, their laughter and chatter fading into the marble corridors. The night had gone better than anyone expected, and for Ethan Reed, it was a rare relief. As he and Lila Hart walked toward the exit, a few investors stopped to shake his hand, their smiles warm and approving. You have a remarkable assistant, Ethan, one of them said. Sharp mind. Composed. Ethan gave a polite nod, glancing sideways at Lila, who stood quietly beside him, eyes lowered in humility. She looked nothing like the timid maid who had polished his floors yesterday. Somehow, she belonged here tonight, and that realization unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Outside, the night air was cool and damp. The chauffeur opened the car door, and they slid into the back seat. For several minutes, neither spoke. The city lights streaked past the windows, and the hum of traffic filled the silence. Finally, Ethan broke it. You handled yourself well tonight, he said, his tone neutral but sincere. Lila turned her head slightly. Thank you, Mr. Reed. I just tried to listen. That is more than most people do in that room, he replied. He paused, then added softly. You surprised me. Lila smiled faintly, her voice barely above a whisper. You surprised me too. I never imagined a man like you could notice someone like me. He looked at her, caught off guard by the honesty in her tone. And what kind of man am I? Lila. She hesitated, searching for words. Someone who works too much and trusts too little. Ethan let out a quiet laugh. Not mocking but thoughtful. You are not wrong. He turned back to the window, watching the reflection of the city glide across the glass. The car stopped in front of the Reed penthouse. The valet hurried to open the door. Lila stepped out first, her heels clicking lightly against the wet pavement. Inside the elevator, the silence between them felt different. Now, no longer heavy, but charged with something unspoken. When the doors opened, Ethan spoke before she could leave. "Wait." She turned, unsure what to expect. "I owe you an apology," he said. "For the way I treated you before the dinner, I assumed you would embarrass me." Leela shook her head. "You do not owe me anything, Duess. You gave me a chance. That is more than I ever thought I would have." He studied her face, noticing the exhaustion behind her calm eyes. "You should rest. It has been a long day." "Yes, sir," she said softly, then turned toward the servants' staircase. "Lila," he called again. She stopped. "Next week, there will be another event, a smaller one. If you are free, I would like you to come." Her eyes widened slightly. "As your maid or your guest?" A small smile touched his lips. "As my guest?" For a moment, she simply stood there, the hum of the city filling the silence. Then she nodded, her voice trembling just a little. "I would be honored, Mr. Reed." When she disappeared down the hall, Ethan remained still, staring at the closed door. He could not explain it, but something had shifted inside him. For years he had surrounded himself with people who bowed to his wealth and power. But tonight, one quiet woman had spoken to him like he was simply human. Later, alone in his study, he loosened his tie and poured a glass of whiskey. The headlines would come tomorrow. He was certain of it. But for the first time, he did not care. Across the city, in a tiny apartment above a grocery store, Lila removed her borrowed gown and folded it carefully back into its box. As she looked out her window at the same skyline, she whispered to herself, "What did I just walk into?" Neither of them knew it yet, but the line between employer and employee had already begun to blur one act of kindness at a time. The week that followed moved quietly, but something subtle had changed inside the Reed household. The air no longer felt as cold as it used to. The maids whispered about how their boss had actually smiled that morning. The chef noticed that he finished his breakfast instead of leaving it half untouched. No one knew why, except perhaps Ethan Reed himself. Every evening, after work, he found his thoughts drifting back to that dinner, to Lila Hart, was sitting beside him, calm and graceful, her honesty cutting through the noise of status and ego. He caught himself wondering what she was doing at that very moment, and every time, he pushed the thought away. On Thursday afternoon, he stood by the grand piano in the living room, flipping through a few reports when he heard a soft knock. Lila appeared at the doorway, wearing her simple uniform, hands clasped in front of her. "Mr. Reed, the tailor dropped off your suit for Saturday's charity gala," she said quietly. He nodded, then hesitated. "Lila, do you have a moment?" Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Yes, sir." He motioned for her to come closer. On the table lay a white envelope and a sleek invitation embossed with silver letters. "There is a dinner this weekend," he said. "It is smaller than last time. I will need you to attend again." She blinked, uncertain. "As your guest again?" "As my guest," he confirmed. "It would not look right if I appeared alone. You did well before. And people like you." Lila's lips parted in disbelief. "Mr. Reed, I do not belong in those places. I barely survived the last one." He crossed his arms, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You did not survive, Lila. You outshone them. That is why I am asking again." Her cheeks warmed, and she looked away. "If you insist." I do," he said simply. "The stylist will bring something suitable tomorrow." "Do not argue." She nodded, quietly leaving the room. But her heart raced. The thought of another night among the powerful terrified her. Yet, deep inside, she also felt a spark of something she could not name, something between fear and excitement. Saturday came faster than she expected. The city glowed beneath a clear sky, the kind of night that made every street shimmer with promise. This time, Lila's dress was emerald green, elegant but modest, perfectly matching her quiet nature. When she stepped into the foyer, Ethan froze mid-sentence on a phone call. He hung up without finishing. For a moment, he just looked at her. "You look incredible," he said softly, almost to himself. "Thank you, Mr. Reed," she replied, shyly lowering her eyes. During the drive to the gala, the silence between them was comfortable. She watched the lights blur past the car window. "Why do you go to so many of these events?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Because it is what people expect of me. Every deal, every partnership begins with a handshake over champagne. It is exhausting, then why keep doing it? Because without it, the company falls. And without the company, thousands of employees lose their jobs. It is a cage made of gold. Lila, it looks beautiful, but it is still a cage. Her voice softened. That sounds lonely. Ethan turned to her, meeting her eyes in the faint glow of the street lights. It is. For a second, the distance between them dissolved. Neither of them spoke again until the car stopped in front of the hotel. Cameras flashed. Reporters turned. Once again, every eye followed the mysterious woman by Ethan Reed's side. But this time, she walked with a steadier step. She was still nervous, but she was no longer afraid. As they entered the ballroom, Ethan leaned close and whispered, "You belong here, Lila." Whether they see it or not, and for the first time in years, she actually believed him. Millionaire, Fakogai Dachang Ba Mui Chin Fut said. The gala was already in full swing when Ethan Reed and Lila Hart entered the grand hall. The glow of chandeliers shimmered above crystal glasses, and a soft orchestra played near the stage. Conversations paused for a brief moment as the crowd turned to see them arrive. Ethan was used to being the center of attention, but tonight, he noticed the subtle shift. Eyes lingered on her more than on him. Lila could feel it too. The curious glances, the whispers hidden behind polite smiles. She kept her chin high, remembering Ethan's words in the car. "You belong here." But as they took their seats near the front, one familiar face brought a chill down her spine. Vanessa Moore, elegant in black silk, already watching them with a smirk that promised trouble. Moments later, the host announced the start of the evening's program. A charity auction would follow dinner, raising funds for underprivileged schools. Ethan had donated a significant amount, and he was expected to speak briefly. Between courses, he leaned toward Lila. "If things get overwhelming, just breathe," he murmured. "And remember, no one here is better than you." She gave a faint nod, clutching her napkin like an anchor. When Ethan was called to the stage, applause filled the room. He delivered his speech with confidence, but his eyes found Lila often, like she grounded him in a sea of formality. The crowd admired his charm. Even Vanessa clapped slowly, though her smile was razor-sharp. After the speech, servers brought out dessert. That was when the test came sudden, sharp, and public. Vanessa rose from her table and glided toward them, her voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Ethan, darling," she said sweetly, "I must say, your taste in company has evolved. Tell me, how does one find such a well-mannered maid these days?" The word maid hung in the air like poison. The surrounding tables went quiet. Lila froze, her heart thudding in her chest. Ethan's expression hardened instantly. But before he could respond, Lila spoke. She looked straight at Vanessa, her voice steady but gentle. "Good manners are not something you find, Miss Moore. They are something you learn, regardless of where you work." The silence cracked. A few people exchanged glances. Then someone at a nearby table chuckled softly, followed by another. Within seconds, polite laughter rippled across the hall. Vanessa's smile faltered, her face tightening. Ethan rose to his feet, his voice calm but firm. "Lila is my guest tonight, and she has represented herself and this company with grace. You would do well to show the same respect." Vanessa's eyes flashed, but she said nothing more. She turned sharply and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Lila exhaled only when she was gone. Her hands trembled beneath the table, though she forced herself to appear composed. Ethan leaned closer and said quietly, "You handled that better than most executives I know." She met his gaze, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I have dealt with worse, Mr. Reed." People say things when they need to feel taller. For the first time that night, Ethan laughed softly. It was genuine, unguarded, and warm. "You have a way of cutting straight to the truth." The orchestra swelled again, and the auction resumed, but neither of them paid much attention. When the evening ended, guests approached their table one by one to compliment Ethan on his poised companion. Even the chairman, Mr. Hollis, shook Lila's hand and said, "You have more class than half this room, young lady." As they left the ballroom, Ethan placed his hand lightly at her back, guiding her through the crowd. "Thank you," he said. "You did more than just save me tonight. You reminded me what dignity looks like." Outside, the city lights shimmered across the wet pavement. Lila looked up at him, her voice soft. "You did not need saving, Mr. Reed. You just needed someone to stand beside you." He stopped for a moment, watching her under the glow of the streetlights, and realized she was right. In a world built on appearances, she had given him something real, and that, more than wealth or power, left him speechless. The following morning, the city woke to a flood of photographs splashed across business headlines. Ethan Reed, the elusive millionaire CEO, had once again made the front page, but this time, not for a merger or a record-breaking profit. The headline read, "Mystery Woman Steals Spotlight at Reed Charity Gala." The photo showed him standing beside Lila Hart, his hand gently resting at her back as they left the event. She looked calm, radiant, and nothing like the maid she truly was. By noon, every gossip column had published a variation of the same story. Ethan stood by the glass wall of his office, scrolling through the endless wave of notifications. His phone buzzed with calls from shareholders, board members, and his publicist. Each one asked the same question: who is she? He did not answer any of them. Downstairs, Lila was polishing the grand staircase when her co-worker, Clara, rushed over, breathless. "Lila, you are on the news. Look." She held out her phone. Lila's eyes widened at the sight of her own face on the screen. The caption beneath it read, "From Maid to Mystery Muse. Who is the woman by Ethan Reed's side?" Her heart dropped. "Oh no," she whispered. By afternoon, the gossip had spread through every corner of the Reed Tower. Some whispered with envy, others with judgment. Ethan's assistant entered his office hesitantly. "Sir, the board has called for an emergency meeting. They are concerned about the optics." Ethan sighed. Of course they are. 2 hours later, he walked into the boardroom, where a half-dozen executives waited, stiff and silent. The chairman, Mr. Hollis, cleared his throat. "Ethan, you know how fragile investor confidence can be. Bringing a household employee to a high-profile event, it looks unprofessional." Ethan kept his voice calm. Lila conducted herself with more dignity than anyone else in that room. If professionalism is what matters, she exceeded all of you. Murmurs filled the room. Mr. Hollis frowned. "Personal feelings aside, we cannot afford another headline like this." Ethan stood, his patience thinning. Then perhaps it is time the company stopped worrying about headlines and started worrying about integrity. He left before anyone could reply. That evening, the storm reached Lila. She was called to the study, where Ethan waited. The newspaper spread open on his desk. She stood nervously at the door. "Sit down." "Lila," he said quietly. She obeyed, hands clasped in her lap. He studied her face for a long moment. "You have seen the articles?" "Yes, 2. Sir, I am so sorry. I never meant to cause trouble. You did nothing wrong," he replied firmly. "I brought you into that world. I should have known it would bite." Her voice trembled. "People will think I am something I am not." He softened. "Let them think what they want. You know the truth, and so do I." There was a silence thick, heavy, and fragile. Then Lila spoke, barely above a whisper. "Maybe it is better if I leave for a while, until it all settles." Ethan's chest tightened at the thought. "Leave." She nodded. "I never wanted to be a problem for you." He took a step closer, his voice low. "You are not a problem, Lila. You are the only person in my life who has not asked me for anything but honesty." Her eyes glistened, but she forced a smile. Even honesty can cost too much sometimes. "Mr. Reed," he wanted to argue, to tell her to stay. But the words refused to form. Instead, he watched her stand and walk toward the door, her quiet footsteps fading into the hall. Outside, the city lights blurred through the window. Ethan stayed where he was, alone with the echo of her words, realizing that the woman who had entered his life as a maid had just walked out, carrying his peace with her. For the next several days, Ethan Reed buried himself in work. Meetings, reports, and phone calls filled every waking hour. But none of it quieted the emptiness that had settled inside him. The house felt different without Lila Hart. Her quiet footsteps, her morning humming, even the soft clinking of dishes gone. The silence was unbearable. One evening, he returned home later than usual. The penthouse was spotless, as always, but lifeless. On the kitchen counter, he found a small envelope with his name written in delicate handwriting. It was Lila's resignation letter. "Thank you for everything," it read. "I will always be grateful for your kindness. Please do not look for me. I just want peace." He stood there for a long time, staring at the words until they blurred. Peace. That was exactly what he did not have. The next morning, the fallout began. Tabloids printed new rumors claims that Ethan had fired his maid after the scandal, that he was hiding from reporters, that his reputation was on the edge. At the board meeting, investors questioned his judgment again. Some suggested he take a temporary leave. Ethan sat through it all without speaking. He had built an empire through control. But for the first time, he realized control meant nothing without trust. That afternoon, he dismissed the driver and walked alone through the city. The sidewalks buzzed with life, but he felt detached, like a ghost passing through a world that no longer needed him. When he stopped for coffee at a small shop, the young barista smiled kindly. "Rough day. Brie, sir." He almost laughed. "Something like that. Try this," she said, sliding a cup toward him. "It helps more than you think." He sat by the window, sipping the coffee slowly. Across the street, a woman helped an elderly man cross through traffic, her gentle patience catching his attention. It reminded him of Lila, her quiet courage, her kindness that needed no audience. He realized he had spent years surrounded by people who flattered him, but Lila was the only one who had ever told him the truth. That night, Ethan made a decision. He called his assistant, find out where Lila Hart went after she left. The next day, the report came. She had returned to her old neighborhood in Brooklyn, renting a small apartment near her brother's college. She had taken a temporary job at a community center, teaching evening classes in etiquette and communication for women looking for work. Without hesitation, Ethan drove there himself. The community center was modest but full of life, children laughing in the hallways, volunteers stacking boxes of donated clothes. When he stepped inside, heads turned. He clearly did not belong in this place, dressed in his tailored suit among simple people. Lila was at the front of a small classroom, speaking softly to a group of women. Her voice was calm, encouraging. When she turned and saw him standing in the doorway, her expression froze. "Mr. Reed," she said quietly. As the others looked on curiously, "Ethan," he corrected gently. "Just Ethan." There was a long pause before she dismissed the class. One by one, the women filed out, leaving the two of them alone. "You should not be here," she said, keeping her tone steady. "Probably not," he admitted. "But I had to see you." "Why?" "Because everything feels wrong without you." He took a slow breath. "I thought success was about being the best in the room. You made me realize it is about being the best version of myself." Lila shook her head, fighting back emotion. "You do not owe me anything. Ethan, you have a company to protect." He stepped closer. "I do not care about the company right now. I care about the person who reminded me what integrity looks like." For a moment, neither spoke. The noise from outside faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the old lights above them. Lila's voice softened. "You do not belong in this world." "Ethan, maybe not," he said, "but it is the first place I have felt human in a long time." Her eyes glistened, but she turned away, unsure of what to say. He did not push further. Instead, he reached into his pocket and placed a folded envelope on the desk. "This is a proposal," he said, "not for work, for something that might actually matter," and before she could respond, he walked out, leaving her staring at the letter, her heart pounding with a feeling she could no longer deny. For a long while after Ethan Reed left, Lila Hart just stood there in the empty classroom, staring at the envelope on the desk. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for it. On the front, written in his familiar handwriting, were two simple words. For Lila. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single page. It was not typed like his usual business letters. It was handwritten, every line careful and deliberate. "I once believed power came from control. Then you showed me it comes from courage. I will be hosting a press conference tomorrow at the Reed Foundation Hall. I intend to tell the truth about everything. If you can, please come." Ethan, Lila, sank into a chair, her heart pounding. A press conference. About everything. The thought of facing the world again terrified her. Yet, deep down, she knew this was not just about him. It was about reclaiming her own voice after being reduced to headlines and whispers. The next morning, the city buzzed with anticipation. News channels announced that Ethan Reed, the notoriously private CEO, would speak publicly for the first time in years. Reporters gathered outside the Reed Foundation Hall. Cameras lined the entrance. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Executives whispered nervously in the corners. They expected him to issue a statement that would save face an apology. perhaps a denial, but Ethan had something else in mind. As he stepped onto the stage, the flashes erupted like a storm. He stood tall behind the podium. No prepared notes. No teleprompter. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice calm and steady. "There has been much speculation about the woman who accompanied me to the recent charity gala. Her name is Lila Hart. She worked for me as a housekeeper. And yes, she is the woman in the photographs." The room buzzed with shock. He waited until it settled, then continued. "But what matters is not her title. It is her integrity. While others saw power, she saw people. While others flattered me, she challenged me. And that changed everything I thought I knew about success." From the back of the room, Lila watched, unseen, her eyes filling with tears. Ethan went on, his voice gaining quiet strength. "We talk about leadership as if it is built from profit and image. But leadership means nothing without honesty and humility. I will not apologize for having someone like Lila Hart beside me. In fact, I am proud that she was." The crowd murmured. Cameras clicked wildly. Mr. Hollis, the chairman, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, realizing the tide of opinion was changing right before his eyes. When Ethan finished, he stepped away from the podium. For a moment, there was silence. Then a reporter stood up and asked, "Where is Miss Hart now?" Ethan looked out over the crowd, a faint smile touching his lips. "She is exactly where she belongs, reminding people like me that kindness is not weakness." The applause began softly, then spread through the hall like a wave. Ethan turned and saw her standing near the doorway. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, it felt like the world disappeared, leaving only the two of them, a man who had built walls and a woman who had quietly torn them down. After the conference, Lila waited outside by the steps, unsure if she should stay. When he finally emerged through the crowd, he walked straight to her. Reporters turned their cameras, sensing another headline, but he did not care. "Why did you do that?" she asked softly. "Because it was the truth," he said, "and I am done hiding behind lies." "You might lose everything," she whispered. He shook his head. "Not everything. Not if you are still here." The noise of the city faded as he reached for her hand. For the first time since their worlds had collided, she did not pull away. Around them, flashbulbs burst, but neither of them flinched. It was no longer about the scandal or the company. It was about redemption, the moment when a man who once measured life in profit finally learned the true value of love and dignity. The storm of headlines that followed the press conference lasted only a week, but what replaced it was something Ethan Reed had never experienced before. Respect that came not from fear or money, but from authenticity. Investors stopped calling to complain. Employees began sending messages of quiet support. Even Mr. Hollis, the old chairman, admitted in a board meeting, perhaps this company needed a little honesty after all. Yet none of that mattered to Ethan as much as the woman who had stood silently beside him outside those glass doors. Lila Hart had changed the course of his life simply by being herself. A few weeks later, the Reed Foundation hosted a small exhibition called The Hands That Build. It celebrated everyday workers, housekeepers, drivers, assistants, janitors, those who kept the company running but were rarely seen. Lila had helped design the event. Though she refused to take credit, she moved quietly among the guests, arranging photo displays and greeting families. Ethan arrived late, as usual, but the moment he saw her, he forgot the speeches, the press, and the board members. She was wearing a simple cream dress, her hair loosely tied, her smile genuine. When the event ended and the last guests drifted out, Ethan approached her near a display showing photographs of longtime employees. He handed her a small velvet box. "What is this?" she asked softly. He smiled. "A thank you. And maybe something more." Inside was a delicate silver ring, not extravagant, but beautifully simple. Lila blinked, too startled. "Ethan, I cannot accept this." "Yes, you can," he said quietly, "because it is not a gift, it is a promise." Her breath caught. A promise for what? He took her hands in his. "For a future where I stop hiding behind walls, for a life that is not built on contracts or titles, but on truth." "Lila, you once told me that honesty costs too much. You were right, but I am ready to pay the price." Tears glimmered in her eyes as she whispered, "You do not need to buy my heart. Ethan, you already earned it." He smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Then let us build something new together. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the Hudson River. They stepped out onto the terrace, the night air crisp and quiet. For the first time, Ethan felt completely free. Free from pretense. Free from the weight of image. Leela stood beside him, and the world seemed simple again. In the months that followed, the foundation flourished under their joint leadership. Lila created programs that offered education and housing support for working-class families. Ethan, now a quieter and humbler man, attended every event, not as a sponsor, but as a volunteer. They worked side by side, their lives intertwined not by wealth, but by purpose. One evening, nearly a year later, they returned to the same ballroom where their story had begun. The chandeliers gleamed. The same orchestra played softly, but the energy was different. This time, Ethan was not hosting investors or rivals. It was a charity gala for the Workers' Fund. Lila's idea. As the crowd applauded the foundation's success, Ethan turned to her and said, "You once told me you never belonged in rooms like this." She smiled gently. "I was wrong. I just needed the right reason to be here." He reached into his pocket and produced the same silver ring she had kept hidden in a drawer for months. "Then maybe it is time to make it official," he said, kneeling slightly as the room fell silent. "Leela Hart, will you marry me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded, whispering, "Yes." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. But this time, neither of them cared. What began as a contract of convenience had become a vow of love and integrity. The millionaire who once lived behind glass walls had finally learned that true wealth was not measured in fortune or fame. It was found in the quiet courage of a heart that dared to love.